So I woke up this morning and I was looking for a shirt. And I thought, well, what shirt will I wear today? I decided to wear this Led Zeppelin shirt. Isn't that cool? So, and then I put the shirt on, drank some coffee. It's relatively early in the morning now as I make this video. But anyway, I drank a cup of coffee, walked around with the shirt, did some exercise. And I thought, wow, this shirt. Okay, here's a story about this shirt. It's very interesting. I bought this Zeppelin shirt probably 3 years ago or so in a mall near where I live. I had not had any Zeppelin shirts before, quite honestly. So I thought, oh, that's cool. I'm going to get this Zeppelin shirt. So I buy this Zeppelin shirt, I bring it home, and like a week later, I didn't even notice then, but a week later, I put it on and looked at it. I go, wait, Led Zeppelin, United States of America, 1977. Okay, so they did a big U.S. tour in 1977, and I thought, I'm serious. When I bought this shirt, it didn't even click in my head. I was at a concert in this tour when I was 14 years old. I think it was actually one of my first rock concerts as a young person. I was 14 years old in 1977. I went to Led Zeppelin. It was a day on the green in July. I don't remember the exact day. It was July 1977, Oakland Coliseum. I grew up a couple hours away from Oakland, so I remember that. I forget how I even got there. I think I went in a big bus with a bunch of other kids or teenagers or something like that, or maybe I think I went with some friends or something. I can't even remember. But it was just a surreal experience. Here I am, 14 years old, in the Oakland Coliseum, walking around with a bunch of people floating around on LSD. And so Zeppelin was one of my first bands that I saw. Of course, they were probably my favorite band growing up in high school, in those ages. Also, it makes me reminisce a little bit about my own life. I started classical piano, or I started piano lessons when I was 6, going on 7. Okay, so I was very young, and that I attribute that starting at a young age was how I became so proficient at the piano. I was always loved music. So as I grew up, my parents never forced me to practice. I just would sit down and practice the piano. In fact, my parents and my brother and sister would often complain. They'd yell at me to stop practicing because they wanted to watch something on TV or something. So it was actually the opposite. I loved to practice. I saw Led Zeppelin. I also saw a lot of other great bands like Leonard Skinner. I don't have a Skinner shirt, but I wish I did. But I saw Leonard Skinner around that same time. In fact, I may have been that same year in 1977, of course, before the plane crash killed their lead singer and some other people. So I saw Skinner, and it was incredible. Those years were so incredible. When I wear shirts like this, it just makes me want to reminisce, and I want to go back to high school, the 70s, and see Led Zeppelin again, or see Leonard Skinner again. Another thing that I really reminisce about when I wear shirts like this is my involvement in rock bands. And I remember that when I was like 12 or 13, me and my best friend Paul and I formed a band, and we had a couple other kids in our band too, a drummer, a couple drummers, different drummers, and a bass player. And we used to practice in Paul's garage, right down the street. It was 4 houses down from where I grew up, and Paul was my best friend growing up. And, so I played keyboards, he played guitar. Actually, he got an electric guitar when he was young. I think he was like 9 or 10 or something when he got his first electric guitar. I remember that he learned the guitar solo to Stairway to Heaven, the studio version. He learned that guitar solo just from the record, so that's what the kids did back in those days. So he played it, I remember, note for note, Jimmy Page's guitar solo, just learning it off the record. This is like before YouTube, before any of that. So I remember that was funny. And then we practiced in Paul's garage. And I remember it was funny because we had a drummer named Pete. And Pete was like a year or so older than us. Pete was a big guy, I think he was on like the football team or something. And Pete used to bum cigarettes off Paul's mother, who was like a total chain smoker. So Paul's mother would be, she'd come out. She was a really, really nice lady. I really loved her to death. And she'd come out, and Pete, this 15-year-old kid who's like a football player kid, would, go and, kind of butter up Paul's mother, and and then she'd give him a couple cigarettes. It was hilarious. So those were the days. And then I was also in a band. Let me see. As you can see, I'm in a sort of a storytelling mood right now. I was also in a band a little bit later than that, like a few years later. I was around junior, senior in high school at that time. So the early bands I was in I was like age 13, 14, 15, those ages. And I remember that once I found a cassette, or my mother had a cassette of one of our practice sessions. And I remember I was in college at that time, and I had come back for spring break or something, and I put on the tape and I listened. I said, "Oh, this is our band, 15 years ago." And I put on the tape, and it was awful. It sounded just terrible. We thought we were great. When you're 14, you think you're great, and it just sounded awful. So anyway, fast forward a few years. So I was around the 17-year area. I played in a band. It was sort of like a Grateful Dead kind of cover band with a bunch of real deadhead kind of stoner guys. So I remember the lead guitarist in that band. Okay, get this. Okay, I grew up in Davis, California. Davis, California. Okay, so this is no joke. Our lead guitarist, his name was Dave. His first name was Davis, and his last name was Davis. He lived in Davis. So Davis from Davis. Anyway, he was a really good lead guitar player. I mean, he had all the riffs down, and he was very experienced. He was a good 10 years older than me. So I was 17. Davis was probably in his late 30s by then, maybe even 40, I don't know. And all the other guys in the band were like at least 10 years older than me. So I was this little kid, 17, and I was playing with all these guys who were like 30 or something. And I remember they would make me roll all the joints, because I was called, "Okay, come on, nimble fingers, let's take a break." And then they'd say, "Come on, nimble fingers, roll us a joint." So I was like the joint roller. So I became an expert at rolling joints, and of course an expert at smoking them too, with all of my bandmates. And this band was I really liked this band. I really liked this. I don't even know the name of it, but I don't even remember the name. But I remember we played in some bars and things like that. We actually did some public venues, and it was a pretty good band, like a sort of a hippie-ish kind of music, Grateful Dead kind of music band. Oh, I had a Fender Rhodes at that time. They're so classic. God, I wish I would have never sold that. you know, later on when I started to get more into classical and didn't do rock anymore, I got rid of my Fender Rhodes. You know, it's probably like a collector's item now. You know, anyway, I probably would have been stashed in my mother's garage anyway. So I had a Fender Rhodes in those days, and it sounded really nice. And anyway, Davis from Davis was a total, like, not only was he was a total cokehead too. He would walk around with one of those cocaine dispenser things. He was like always, you know, doing coke all the time. And then we had another guitarist, Bobby, who was around the same age though, but Bobby was a little less of a stoner and more of a sort of a white collar kind of guy. But he was a total cokehead too. You know, he'd be walking around with those coke sniffer things. And then we had a drummer. Well, listen to this. So we had a total stoner cokehead named Davis from Davis. We had a guy named Bobby who was like this more cool guy, more white collar cool guy. And he thought he was cool because he knew music theory. He was like the music theory guy because he took music theory at the local college or something. So, and back, I didn't know anything about, well, I mean, I was just 17, so I had not taken college level theory yet, but he was like the big wig college level theory guy. So he was the theory guy. And then sometimes we would talk about theory stuff. Anyway, so we had Bobby, we had Davis from Davis. And then the drummer we had at that time, he was some hick guy. I don't know where they found him. He was like this, he was like this like redneck guy. I don't know, didn't even fit into our image. So he was this redneck guy who couldn't even keep a beat. I mean, he was just a bad drummer. And you know, he didn't, I don't think he liked me because I was 17, he was like 30 something. And me being a hotshot 17-year-old, I should have just kept my mouth shut. I should have not tried to insult him because he was an elder, you know, but me being this sort of an obnoxious, you know, arrogant 17-year-old, you know, I told him once, I said, can't you keep a beat or something, or that was off, or let's do that again, you were off. So he hated that because here I am, a 17-year-old telling this 35-year-old hick guy what to do. And so he didn't like me very much because I did things like that. When I think back, I probably wouldn't have done that because I think it's better to be a little more polite, but you know, what happens happens anyway. So we had this redneck hick guy playing drums who had a terrible beat. We did have another drummer, I think, for a while, and I forget who it was. And then we had our two main guitarists, Davis, who lives in Davis, and Bobby, the cool music theory guy. And then we had another guitarist. Yeah, we had another guitarist. Yeah, we had another guitarist, Robert. Okay, so we had Bobby and we had Robert. So Robert was the real white collar guy. He was a real serious guy with nice clean cut guy and drove a BMW. And he I don't know. It's like he didn't fit in either to the image. So we had all these different, you know, it's just a motley crew of a band, you know. We had this this total cokehead stoner guy on lead guitar, sort of a, you know, kind of a college dude, older college dude, music theory guy on guitar. We had like a white collar guy who drives a BMW, like a really nice BMW. He was like, I think, a business owner or something. And then a hick guy who couldn't keep beat, you know, and the way he dressed, he looked like a cowboy or something. And he was our drummer. And anyway, you can imagine what a band like this would sound like, you know, it's hilarious. Anyway, after that, oh yeah, okay, now I remember it. Now I'm in my storytelling mode. I remember we had another bass player. It was hilarious. Oh, actually, not just hilarious, but it was nice, really. We had a new bass player come in that Davis found us a bass player. Because we needed one. And he found this guy. He was probably going to the university, to UC Davis, where the local university is. And a lot of international students study there. So there was a guy his name was Shahar. I'm quite certain his name was Shahar, and he was from Israel. And he had a real nice guy, real nice, intelligent guy. He had big, long black hair and this flowing beard. He looked like Cat Stevens, actually, the Cat Stevens from the 70s. So he was a real hippie-looking guy. And he had this, I don't know, his bass playing. He's just like, he I mean, he was really good. He was like really slick, and I think it was like a fretless and all this stuff, and he played all this really progressive jazz stuff. I don't know. It's like I think he was too good for us. I asked Davis, where did you find this bass player? This guy, he was like a superstar or something, and here he was playing with this unrefined hick drummer, this stoner 17-year-old on keyboards, this stoner cokehead guitarist. There are two stoner cokehead guitarists. And here's Shahar. I remember Shahar smoked some pot, so we'd take breaks and get stoned and stuff. But Shahar was a great bass player. I don't know what happened to him. We just had him for a while, and he just kind of disappeared. So that was actually the last I remember of bands, of my band experience. After that, I was in college. I was in university then, and it's funny, when I started university studies in 1981, I pretty much just gave up all of that past. I don't think I ever played in any rock bands anymore. Like, it was just a total cutoff. So when I got into because I was so busy with my doing everything else, my classes and my schoolwork and my music studies, I didn't have time for that. So it was just 100% classical from there on. But when I wear shirts like this Zeppelin shirt, it really makes me reminisce, and I think it's really, I'm really, I get warm and fuzzy inside to think that 1977, I was at a concert at that tour as a young person, and this is something that I can tell my children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and puppies, grandpuppies, great-grandpuppies, I mean, I can actually say, I saw Led Zeppelin. How many people can say that? Well, right now a lot can, but let's say when I'm like, if I get to be like 95 years old or something like that, imagine me being 95 years old and wearing this shirt. Oh, I went to Led Zeppelin in 1977. Now that's going to be something, because there won't be a lot of people around when I'm 95. There won't be a lot of people, if I'm 95. There won't be a lot of people around then that ever saw Led Zeppelin, because I was 14. So you'll have to find people that were younger than that. Younger than 14. There aren't that many. Not very many parents will let their kids who are younger than 14 go to big concerts like that by themselves. In fact, we didn't even have any adults with us. It was like just a carload of teenagers. Anyway, that's my storytelling mode for today. So maybe you can visit me in a future video and I'll tell you more stories about my secret past.